In the hot sands and silence, where no one hears the heroes, a legend is born. Specialist Morgan Ray is not the one expected to join an elite military unit, but it is her precision, endurance, and ability to see what others ignore that changes the course of invisible wars. From the humiliation of the firing range to covert missions in the most dangerous parts of the world, she doesn't just survive. She becomes the one who leads others in the dark. Welcome to my channel. They say the desert has a voice, and if you're foolish enough to ignore it, it'll burn its lesson into your bones. That morning, the wind howled over Fort Kessler's rifle range, dragging fine grit across our skin and stinging like insult wrapped in sunlight. The air shimmered with heat, already boiling by 0800, and every time my boots crunched the scorched gravel, I felt like I was walking through the gates of something biblical. I stood at the edge of the range, half-shadowed beneath a sagging net of camouflage draped over metal poles. Not quite hiding, but not exactly front and center either. My name's Morgan Ray, Specialist, U.S. Army, and at that moment, I might as well have been a ghost. 23 men lined the main firing row, veterans, all muscle and scowls, many of them with more deployments than birthdays they could remember. And me? I was the girl with something to prove, according to just about everyone but me. "Hey, Ray," came that voice again, gravel-dry and laced with that familiar sneer. "You sure you didn't mean to sign up for the nursing corps?" Master Sergeant Brandon Heller. Towering. Decorated. A man whose ego could knock satellites out of orbit. He laughed as he said it, turning back to his rifle like he'd just made a joke for the ages. The others chuckled, low and smug. I didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just kept cleaning the bolt on my M110 with deliberate care, the kind my grandfather, God rest him, once said separates the marksman from the wannabe. I hadn't said a word to Heller in days. Truth be told, I didn't need to. My silence, like the rifle I held, spoke louder than anything else could. See, I wasn't there to teach anyone a lesson. I wasn't there to break barriers, wave flags, or change minds. I was there because I'd earned my slot in the Advanced Designated Marksman certification, same as every other soul on that range. But from day one, it was clear they thought I'd slipped through the cracks. I wasn't one of them, not in their eyes. But that didn't matter, because I wasn't shaped by their world. I was forged in the shadows of old pine forests in northern Idaho, where my father taught me how to shoot from the age of 6. He wasn't military. He wasn't even a hunter, not really. But he was a man who understood precision, discipline, and stillness. When he passed, I carried those lessons with me like sacred scripture. Every morning before first light, I'd step onto that range early, find my quiet corner away from the rest, and assemble my rifle like it was ritual. The buttstock smooth against my fingers, the scope's cool curve under my palm. There was a rhythm to it all, a peace I never found anywhere else. I didn't need the spotlight. I needed the truth. And the truth was always in the shot. And still, every day brought a new jab. "Don't scuff your nails," they'd joke. "Try not to cry when the recoil hits." Let them talk. What they didn't know, what none of them had bothered to learn, was that I had the top scores on the range. Not just for the course, but for the entire installation. I'd logged hours on simulators, mastered wind compensation models by heart, and could outshoot every man who dared laugh at me. But they didn't see that. What they did see, however, was coming for them. Not through argument, not through anger, but through action. Because by the end of this week, someone would break. And it wouldn't be me. You ever feel something coming before it arrives? Like the air shifts, the sun tilts just a little wrong, and your bones start whispering, "Brace yourself." That's what the 4th week felt like. Final assessment week. The one where they put everything on the line, not just your skills, but your instinct, your composure, your damn soul. The mission scenario was brutal by design. Simulated urban combat, live fire, hostiles hiding behind civilian silhouettes, variables changing minute by minute. And it was hot. God, it was hot. The kind of heat that makes the sweat run down your spine like it's trying to flee the battlefield before you do. Everyone expected assignments to follow the chain of command, based on merit, on record, on logic. But logic doesn't stand a chance against bias. Raise on Sector Echo. Secondary Overwatch. Observation only, Master Sergeant Heller barked out that morning, not even glancing at me. His tone had that oily smugness like he was dropping me off at daycare instead of an assessment range. Sector Echo was garbage. A dead end. No real vantage points, low elevation, minimal threat contact. It was where you stuck people you didn't want seen. I didn't argue. Just nodded once, calm as lake water in winter. But my jaw clenched tight enough to ache. I'd already studied the terrain maps 2 nights before. I knew the layout better than the back of my own hand. And I also knew this. If anyone stuck to Heller's plan, it was going to end in disaster. Before he dismissed us, I stepped forward. "Sir," I said, my voice low but solid. "If you position a shooter on elevation 49, you'll get line of sight through the northeast windows of the target structure. It's the only shot that bypasses both the scaffold obstruction and the thermal baffle." He squinted at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. "Elevation 49's a rubble pile. No viable firing lane. Only from prone position, sir. I ran the angles." He snorted. "Of course you did. Look, Ray, this isn't a math contest. You're here to observe. That's your lane. Stay in it." And that was it. Conversation over. Strategy dead on arrival. Heller had decided the assault pattern, just like he'd done overseas, he said. For times. As if repeating a mistake made it wisdom. The mission kicked off at 0600. And just like I feared, it unraveled in minutes. The targets weren't where they were supposed to be. Civilians, cardboard stand-ins for real hostages, were placed in unpredictable positions. The enemy silhouettes were active, mobile, and vicious. And worst of all, the main breach team couldn't see half of what they needed to. Heller's voice was crackling across the comms like a wildfire, barking orders, adjusting fire, yelling for sight lines that didn't exist. Gunfire popped and echoed, growing more frantic by the second. The casualty count was climbing. Paper cutouts falling, digital scores tanking. And me? I was lying flat in Sector Echo, exactly where they told me to go. But I wasn't observing. I was watching, studying, because I'd already memorized every weak spot in the plan. I reached for my personal map, the one I'd annotated myself, and zeroed in on a narrow utility corridor that wasn't in the primary schematic. It led up to elevation 49, my elevation. So I made a call, not over the radio, just with my body. I moved, quietly, deliberately, through the corridor, past a shattered chain-link gate, up the mound of broken stone and rusted scaffolding. And there it was, the window, the line of sight, exactly as I'd seen it. I lay prone, chambered around, and dialed in my scope. The hostile silhouette appeared, center mass, mid-torso, holding a civilian target in simulated close contact. I breathed once, deep and smooth, and fired. The silhouette dropped. The comms went dead for a second, then erupted in confusion. Who fired? Who's in that sector? Sector Echo? That can't be. But it was. It was me. 3 more shots. 3 more hostiles neutralized. Clean. Non-lethal hits on the training dummies. Heart zone, shoulder joint, spine base. The civilian silhouettes untouched. Unharmed. Mission success restored. And they knew it. They all knew it. I lay there for a moment after the last shot. Not in triumph. Not in defiance. Just in stillness. Because that's what a real marksman does. You make the shot. Then you breathe. Then you wait. Because your job isn't glory. It's clarity. I expected fallout. You don't break chain of command and walk away untouched. What I didn't expect was the silence. That eerie, unnatural quiet that settled over Fort Kessler's barracks like a fog after a storm. Nobody said a word to me that evening. Not Heller. Not the others. Not even my bunkmate, Gonzalez, who usually couldn't stop talking about her caffeine addiction and terrible ex. They avoided my eyes like I carried some contagious affliction. Not fear. Not quite respect either. Just discomfort. Like they didn't know where I fit anymore. I walked into the mess hall. Got my tray. Sat down. Alone. Didn't bother pretending I was okay with it. The truth was, I didn't feel heroic. I felt cracked. That whole day I'd moved like I was on rails. Calculated, precise, unflinching. But the aftermath? That's where it hit. Not regret. Not even anger. Just that creeping doubt. Was I right to take the shot? To disobey? To prove myself at the cost of protocol? But then, I remembered the sound. That sharp, dry crack of my rifle. That instant when the chaos had stopped and clarity had returned. The breath I'd taken before squeezing the trigger. Steady, sure. Yeah, I was right. But right doesn't always mean welcome. That night, I pulled the small metal box out from beneath my bunk. Inside was my father's old field journal. He used to be an instructor back in the day, before a stroke forced him out of service early. He never got over it. Said losing his students was harder than losing his rank. Flipping through the pages, my fingers stopped on a sketch he made. A firing angle, drawn in pencil, annotated with wind direction and bullet drop. At the bottom, in his all-caps handwriting, "Shoot when you must. Speak when you're heard. Never flinch." I didn't sleep much that night. The barracks were too still. My thoughts too loud. I watched the moon rise through the grimy window above my bunk and wondered if anything would ever be the same. Turned out, it wouldn't. The next morning, there was a summons taped to my locker. Specialist Morgan Ray, report to Colonel Reese, Command Office 0900 sharp. My stomach dropped. I knew Reese by reputation. No nonsense. Old school. She didn't care about drama, just results. But still, getting called in like that? It didn't bode well. I walked into her office at exactly 0859. She didn't look up right away, just kept reading whatever file was open in front of her. Her office smelled like strong black coffee and dusted leather. Finally, she looked up. Her eyes were sharp as rifle glass. "Take a seat, Specialist." I sat. She closed the file. "It was my personnel record. Tell me what happened yesterday. From your perspective. No filters." I hesitated a second. Then I told her everything, every detail, every shift in position, every calculation I'd made before taking the shot. I didn't flinch, didn't downplay it, and I didn't try to make myself sound like a hero. When I finished, she didn't speak right away. Then she said, "You know Heller filed a complaint. Accused you of insubordination, unauthorized action, undermining command authority." I nodded. I assumed as much. She leaned forward, hands clasped. "I also have the mission logs. And the recording from your body cam. What I saw was one of the cleanest, most decisive series of shots I've witnessed in 15 years. I blinked. Reese wasn't smiling. She wasn't congratulating me. But something in her eyes shifted. "Specialist Ray," she said finally, "if Heller had taken your advice, his team would have succeeded without casualties. But he didn't. And you, well, you didn't disobey. Not technically. You adapted." My pulse steadied. "Thank you, ma'am." She held up a hand. "Don't thank me yet." She pulled a sealed envelope from her drawer and slid it across the desk. "You've been reassigned. Effective immediately." My heart slammed. Reassigned? To Task Force Guardian. Black Site Operations. Special Recon. And before you ask, yes, it's real. Yes, it's off books. And yes, you were requested. I stared at the envelope. Didn't touch it. "You've got a week to decide," Reese said, standing. "But I'll tell you this much, out there, we don't care what you look like, where you came from, or who underestimates you. We only care if you can deliver." She held my gaze a moment longer. And then she nodded. Dismissed. I didn't open the envelope until that night. I sat on the edge of my bunk, the room empty except for the low mechanical hum of the air filter and the rustle of the wind outside scraping sand against the window. I broke the seal with my thumbnail, unfolded the letter inside. There was no preamble, no fancy header, just a series of coordinates and a single line at the bottom. Report at 0500. No uniform. No questions. It was signed with 3 letters I'd never seen on an official document before. S.D.O. The next morning, I packed light. Just essentials. Boots, hydration gear, my rifle stripped down into its 3 key components. I left the barracks without saying goodbye. They wouldn't have noticed anyway. The coordinates led me to a compound in the high desert, one I didn't even know existed. No signage. No flags. Just a wide gate guarded by 2 men in plain black fatigues with no rank insignia. I handed one of them my letter. He didn't speak. Just scanned it, nodded, and waved me through. What waited inside was something I couldn't have imagined. A facility half underground, with corridors tunneled into the rock. The walls were lined with blast panels, and security doors opened only after full biometric scans. I was escorted to a briefing room where half a dozen others sat in silence, each one looking like they'd stepped straight out of a covert action film, men and women, quiet, sharp-eyed, and deadly calm. A tall woman with iron gray hair and a scar slicing across her temple stepped into the room. "Welcome to Silent Thunder." That was the first time I heard the name out loud. She didn't introduce herself. Didn't ask ours either. "You've all been chosen not because of what you've done, but because of what you understand. Precision. Ethics. The difference between a shot that ends a threat and one that ends a life." She paced slowly, every step a statement. There are wars nobody sees. Fights that never make headlines. And in those moments, we don't need muscle. We need minds that see everything before it happens. Her gaze settled on me for a split second. She didn't nod, didn't smile, just moved on. For the next 6 days, we trained like ghosts. No schedules, no debriefs, We were woken at all hours, made to navigate terrain blindfolded, conducted target identification drills with zero margin for error. We learned how to disappear, not just physically, but digitally, tactically. We were shadows, learning how to fight other shadows. But what set this apart from anything I'd known was what came every night after the sessions. The philosophy. Each evening, they gave us time in the vault, a sealed room lined with relics. Journals, letters, photographs of men and women who had once done this work in total silence. There were old sniper logs, torn field maps, notes scribbled in margins and languages I barely recognized. In one book, a small leather-bound ledger. Inside were entries by someone called C.W. Ray, my father. I didn't cry, but I did sit there for a long, long time, my hand tracing the words he'd written years before I ever enlisted. If you're reading this, then you found the silence. You found what they never saw in you, but what you always knew. You're not here to be seen. You're here to see. I turned the page, and on it, a single entry written in fresh ink. Morgan Ray. Day 1. 2 weeks into Silent Thunder, I learned the first truth they don't teach in boot camp. Not every war needs a battlefield. Our first mission brief dropped like a whisper, not an order. We were handed encrypted sat phones and a set of coordinates. Mine led me to a crumbling coastal village in the eastern Mediterranean. Stone buildings bleached by sun and time, olive trees tangled with dust, and a sky so blue it felt like a lie. The target was a financier, not a warlord, not a general. A man who moved money, quietly, cleverly, into the hands of people who built bombs and sold nightmares. We weren't there to kill him. We were there to stop what he funded. Not by force, by precision. My role? Set up on the 4th floor of a half-collapsed church that overlooked the central square. No firing. Just watch. Just record. Just listen. For 26 hours, I lay in the shadow of a broken steeple, unmoving. My scope trained not on a person, but on their patterns. The way the guards shifted every hour and a half. The courier who always wore red and delivered bags of currency to a battered van. The car that never parked in the same spot twice. My rifle never left its case. My weapon, this time, was information. At the 72nd hour, I sent a single encrypted message. Meeting confirmed. 3 persons. Transfer in briefcase. Timestamped. 0700 local. Escort unarmed. An hour later, a routine customs sweep intercepted the van. Inside? Not weapons. Not cash. Documents. Routes. Maps. Connections between a dozen cells no one had ever seen lined up. The target was arrested by his own country's anti-corruption agency. No blood, no bodies, no headlines. But we dismantled a network without a single bullet fired. And that's when it really sank in. This wasn't about proving myself anymore. This was about using everything I'd ever learned for a purpose so sharp, so pure, it cut through everything else. That night, I stood on the edge of the church roof, wind pulling at my jacket, watching the town breathe below. People lived here. Kids played in alleys. A woman watered her plants, humming a tune I didn't recognize. They'd never know what almost passed through their hands, and they'd never know who stopped it. Back at the safe house, a message was waiting for me. Not from command. From Reese. Just 5 words. I saw the shot. Perfect. I stared at the screen for a long time. Because that's what it was. Even without pulling the trigger, every second, every angle, every quiet decision. It was still a shot. 3 months into Silent Thunder, I stopped seeing enemies. I started seeing echoes. People didn't just fight for power or money. They fought because someone, somewhere, whispered in their ear that they were forgotten. That no one was watching. That silence meant permission. We were there to break that lie. Our next mission took us to the Carpathians, an old fortress near the edge of civilization where a separatist cell was rumored to be gathering former mercenaries. Not to plan an attack. To train others. Radicalize them. And teach them how to disappear. The place had no signal. No cameras. Just layers of moss-covered stone, guards with bored eyes, and a single satellite window every 72 hours. We were 3. Me. Vega, a cyber op from Brazil who could make satellites dance. And Romani, a logistics ghost from Bucharest who spoke 7 languages and didn't seem to sleep. My job? Take overwatch from a ridge overlooking the compound's rear entrance. Again, no shots unless authorized. Our orders were to observe, confirm, and if possible, expose. Vega ran infiltration. Slipped into their communications through a forgotten fiber line still active beneath a shepherd's barn half a mile away. Romani posed as a supplier, hauling crates of repurposed weapons into the loading dock to plant sensors. Me? I watched. Wind clawed at my poncho as snow began to fall. My breath fogged inside my mask. Every hour, I shifted 2 degrees west, logging patrol rotations, facial IDs, weapon loads. It wasn't combat. It was communion. I wasn't just watching them. I was learning them. I knew which guard twitched when he heard dogs. Which one stared too long at the sky. Who was tired. Who was ready to die. And who wasn't. That last part? It mattered. Because on the 4th night, the call came in. Abort extraction. Compromised. Romani's voice. Calm. Final. Vega's calm went dead a minute later. I was alone. The fallback protocol was simple. Destroy intel, retreat to safe ridge, and disappear. But I didn't. Because I'd seen something hours before. A group of kids, barely teenagers, being herded into the training yard. Taught how to hold rifles too big for their arms. Forced to kneel for drills. They weren't fighters. They were bait. And bait doesn't get left behind. I broke protocol. Slid down the ridge under darkness. Made my way to a drainage tunnel Vega had marked earlier. Infiltrated the lower floor through the maintenance shaft. Every step burned with risk. But I knew where the blind spots were. Where they rotated. When they changed out coffee, I'd studied them like scripture. It took me 13 minutes to breach the detention corridor. 6 to lead the kids out. And less than 1 heartbeat to decide to stay behind while they ran. Because one of them, the smallest, had twisted her ankle. I carried her. I ran. Gunfire ripped into the trees behind me. Shouts echoed. But I knew the terrain better than they did. Because I had listened. I made it to the safe ridge. Passed the girl to a local contact. And vanished into the mist. The next day, the compound burned. Not from our team. From within. Turns out, Vega's code bomb delayed in their system. Triggered by a phrase buried in their playbook. I heard it later from Romani, who'd escaped through an old sewage line and rendezvoused with Vega. The phrase? No shot wasted. Vega had heard me say it once. And that was enough. There are no medals in Silent Thunder. No commendations. No ceremonies. No folded flags or salutes. Just missions, one after another, and the silence between them. Sometimes that silence is heavy. Sometimes it feels like the only thing holding the world together. We returned to base 2 weeks after the mountain op Romani had a fractured rib. Vega had a black eye and a smirk that never quite left his face. Me? I had a limp and a question burning in my chest. Was this really how it had to be? The missions weren't what wore us down. It was the quiet. The knowing. That no one outside that subterranean compound would ever hear the names of the children we saved. Or the lives we preserved by erasing threats before they grew teeth. But maybe that was the point. One night, I found myself in the vault again. Same room. Same flickering light. Same walls lined with forgotten stories. I opened my father's ledger. The page I'd added, Morgan Ray. Day 1 inch was now joined by 4 more. Someone had been writing in it. Updating it. Tracking my missions like he had his. But not me. I looked closer. The handwriting was old. Careful. Reese. She was keeping my ledger alive. It hit me like a sucker punch in the ribs. All this time, I thought I was walking alone. Turns out, someone had been marking my steps. And not just anyone. The woman who'd trained my father. Later that night, I asked her. We sat in the ops room, coffee cooling in our hands, blueprints glowing on the table in front of us. You knew him, didn't you? Reese didn't blink. Just nodded slowly. He taught me how to read wind off steel rooftops. How to listen for the absence of noise. He was the best I ever trained, until you. I looked down, unsure what to say. I didn't know you kept his book, I said finally. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. I don't. You do. But legacies like his, like yours, they deserve to be remembered. Even if no one else sees it. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to let this all disappear. Not the missions. Not the names. Not the quiet battles no one ever hears about. I began copying my notes. Creating my own log, not for command. Not even for the record. For the next one. The kid who comes after me. The one who thinks she has to shout to be seen. She won't have to. She'll read this and know she's not alone. She'll see the shots. And she'll understand. It was supposed to be routine. Just surveillance. No contact. A tech handoff in Jakarta's southern sprawl, simple, quiet, forgettable. But plans don't care about fate. Our target was a mid-level coder. A ghost in the intel community. He built encryption for black market warlords. Buried data inside biometric tattoos. Even sold facial spoofing software to rogue diplomats. Our job? Recover a flash drive with details on compromised communication lines before it hit the darknet. I was backup. Vega did the trade. Romani ran outer cover. What we didn't know, what no one knew, was that someone had fed our op to a rival syndicate. A kill crew was already in play. The trade went down at a small pier just before sunrise. Jakarta's coast was shrouded in low fog, the kind that rolls in like a curse. Vega met the contact, got the drive, and then the first shot rang out. Romani's voice cracked over the comms. Ambush. Red 4. North roof. 2 tangos. I moved. Fast. Up 3 flights of abandoned concrete stairs. Across a rooftop still slick from rain. Rifle out. Eyes locked. 1 breath. 1 shot. First sniper dropped. A clean hit through a visor slit no wider than a coin. Second target ducked. My bullet grazed his shoulder, not fatal, but enough to make him rethink his choices. He ran. Below, chaos bloomed. Gunfire rattled the docks. Vega sprinted toward extraction, wounded in the leg. The contact was down, probably dead. The drive still clutched in Vega's bleeding hand. I covered them from the roof, tracking, firing, moving with the rhythm of instinct. 5 shots. 5 lives spared, some mine, some not. It wasn't just about who I hit. It was who I didn't. Romani reached Vega just in time. Pulled him into the alley where our evac was waiting. I took one last shot, at a power junction, shattering it, plunging the whole block into darkness. The only light left was from the muzzle flares of enemies who no longer knew what they were shooting at. We vanished into the smoke like we were never there. That night, we regrouped at an old safe house outside the city. Vega's leg stitched. Romani's jacket shredded but otherwise whole. I washed blood off my hands that wasn't mine. The flash drive, undamaged, sat on the table between us. It held names, frequencies, locations of compromised U.S. assets. The agency told us later we'd saved at least 8 lives that day. Maybe more. No medals. No headlines. Just another page in the ledger. Another echo in the silence. 2 months after Jakarta, they called us to Iceland. That's how I knew something serious was coming. See, you don't pull a team to a decommissioned NATO radar station at the top of the world unless the world's about to tilt. We were briefed in a freezing bunker while wind screamed outside like wolves in steel cages. Reese was there in person this time, not just a voice through encrypted comms. She laid it out in 10 words. There's a mole inside Silent Thunder. One of our own. We didn't blink. Didn't ask who. Just listened. Someone had been feeding traces of our missions, locations, profiles, fragmentary codes, to an outside group called Keshin Directive, a shadow agency gone rogue. Paramilitary. No rules. No faces. Just outcomes. Reese looked tired, like she'd aged years since I last saw her. We don't know what they want, she said, but they're watching us. All of us. And they've already found 3 candidates we were about to recruit. Dead? Romani asked. Gone, she said flatly, like they never existed. The next 3 days were spent underground, running diagnostics, triple-checking clearance trees. Vega tore through firewalls like tissue. Romani traced flight logs and travel patterns. I read files, personnel, mission debriefs, everything I could find. And then it hit me. A pattern. Buried deep inside transport records was a single name that didn't belong. Not a current operator. A civilian analyst who'd washed out of the program years ago. Dismissed for strategic instability. Miles Calhoun. I remembered him. He wasn't dangerous because he was evil. He was dangerous because he thought he was right. We traced him to a remote compound outside Warsaw. A converted monastery, now ringed with motion sensors and satellite intercept arrays. Too well defended for a team op. So they sent me. Alone. I went in under darkness, crawling through icy creek beds and scaling a back wall crusted in frost. Inside, the place smelled like old incense and fresh electronics. I found him in what used to be the chapel, typing on a laptop surrounded by LED screens. My rifle was up, my breath controlled. He didn't flinch when I spoke. You've been feeding ghosts. He turned slowly, his face older than I remembered. Hollowed. They don't deserve to be hidden, he said. The world needs to know. You sold lives, Calhoun. I exposed lies. No, I said. You exposed people. He reached for something on the desk. A flash drive. My finger hovered near the trigger. He didn't raise a weapon, just held the drive like it was a chalice. I didn't shoot him. I stepped forward, took the drive, and whispered, "No more shadows for you." I destroyed the compound's drives, deleted everything, walked Calhoun outside into the frost, and handed him to extraction, silent, alive. Because sometimes justice isn't a bullet. It's knowing you'll never hold a secret again. After Warsaw, things changed. Not in a dramatic, Hollywood ending kind of way, but in the quieter, truer sense. The way storms change landscapes, not by shouting, but by reshaping the ground beneath your feet. Reese retired. Just disappeared one day. No ceremony. No note. Left a single item in my bunk locker. The leather-bound ledger that had belonged to my father. This time, it was filled. Every mission. Every whisper. Every name. And one final entry in a different hand, hers. You were the shot the world never saw coming. I kept reading it over and over that night. Didn't cry. Didn't sleep. Just stared at the words until they burned themselves into my bones. 2 weeks later, the council asked me to take her place. Led Silent Thunder. Train the next generation. Recruit not from the loudest or strongest, but from the ones who carried silence like a blade. I said yes, but with one condition. They come to me clean. No expectations. No reputations. Just one question on their application form. What do you protect when no one's looking? The answers poured in, some heartbreaking, some brilliant. A paramedic who watched a friend die in a riot because no one could reach them. A violinist turned drone operator. A girl who grew up near a military testing range and learned how to read wind by watching leaves move in the blast shadows. They became my squad. We called them the Whispers. No uniforms. No insignia. But when they moved, things changed. I taught them the same way my father taught me, how to assemble a weapon without looking, how to hold breath until the world narrowed to a pinprick, how to know when not to shoot. Because that's the real legacy of a marksman. Not the trigger pull, the decision not to. And sometimes, when the world gets loud, when the old doubts creep in, I step into the vault and open that ledger. I turn the pages, feel the quiet in my chest. I don't see just names or numbers. I see echoes. I see every moment I thought I was alone, and realize I never was. Because the line doesn't break. It bends. It curves. It reaches. And now, someone else is tracing that line. Someone like I once was. Someone who doesn't yet know that their silence is their strength. So I leave them a note. Just one line. Be your own guardian. And remember, some stories don't end. They echo.